Log on, tune in, find out. Another good idea from Cambridge.
Right, thanks very much for inviting me. I'm going to talk briefly about a project I've been involved in. The names of the people involved in it are as you see there. If you have some very hard statistical questions to ask, you may find that you'll get a better answer from 3 of the people than the person who stands in front of you now. However, I will do my best to give you a sense of the importance of this topic and what we've achieved so far. What is cold calling? For those who don't know what cold calling is, it's basically a visit or a phone call from a trader without the consumer actually requesting it. Typically, the trader supplies goods or services, and as I say, it takes place without the consumer expressly requesting the contact. It's not illegal, it's perfectly legal, but of course, in some cases at least, it is a smokescreen for criminal behaviour, which could include rogue trading, it could include burglary. As part of a wider programme throughout the UK, what is termed reassurance policing, the police are increasingly targeting their resources at particular neighbourhoods, or at least some of their resources at particular neighbourhoods, to meet the specific needs, concerns, anxieties, criminality within those neighbourhoods. And the No Cold Calling initiative is just one of those. It doesn't involve a huge input of resources. It typically involves street and house signage. It typically involves information packs for residents to try to support them, to help them to deal with cold callers should they turn up. And there often are informal follow-up meetings, again, as part of an ongoing process of support. So it's not a hugely expensive initiative, but it's part, as I say, of a wider programme of investing police time and some resources into particular neighbourhoods. Cambridgeshire, I believe, is the first county constabulary to bring in such a scheme. And some of the first schemes were initiated in 2005 and extended in 2006. And although this is just a first step of some work we've been doing, we've been looking at the success or otherwise of the no cold calling zones in Peterborough, and that's a map which shows you the location of these zones. Sorry, the colour distinction is not very clear between 2005 and 2006, but let's move on. These are quite small neighbourhoods. This is the data that refers to the 11 schemes that were set up in 2005 and 2006. So these are names of the roads, the streets, postcode, the output area code, the number of dwellings that are covered by the scheme. You can see it's quite small in number, and the dates when they started. That final column, which is coverage, is quite important, as I'll try and explain shortly, because the geographical unit in terms of which the analysis proceeds is somewhat larger than the actual neighbourhoods themselves, which form, in some cases, you can see quite a small proportion of the census output area in terms of which some of the work has had to be done. In other cases, the percentage, the proportion is somewhat larger. So that's the sort of data we're working with. The raw data, that's the graph, the annual dwelling in burglary risk per 100. I should say that because of the the police data, the assessment of these no-call calling zones was carried out in terms of burglary rates rather than specifically rogue trading, for which there is almost no information to work from, or indeed distraction burglary, which is the other side of the coin, is not very well monitored in the case of Cambridge. So we're in the slightly uncomfortable position of having to assess it in terms of just burglary rates. And the individual black lines there are the individual neighbourhoods that I was just referring to. And the assessment is at two levels. At one level is, has the scheme as a whole been successful in Peterborough? So we bulk up all of the individual NCC schemes, the no-call calling neighbourhoods, we bulk them all up into, if you like, a single large neighbourhood and compare them against the controls, which of course the neighbourhoods which have not received no-call calling investment, if you like, from the police. But we would also like to assess the individual schemes themselves. Okay, very quickly, the strategy. Compare burglary rates before and after, of course, the difference between the two time periods being indicative of the influence of the policy. Comparison is done after adjusting for systematic changes in burglary rates in other non-NCC areas. I want to say a little bit about that now because we took 6 different types of controls. First of all, we took all the lower super output areas in Peterborough as our control group, okay, of which there are 88. And then we took a group of 3 subsets of those which had burglary rates which were in some sense comparable to the burglary rates observed in the targeted zones. We also then took the LSOAs that contain the NCC targeted. So if you like, we compared, our control group became the parts of Peterborough which were geographically adjacent to or proximate to where these NCC zones were. And then our final control group was those that had similar deprivation scores. So we had 6 different types of control groups against which we were comparing. And then the last point I want to make, we have to deal with the sparsity of the data, the small number of burglary events. And so this involves 2 stages. One is to just bulk up all the individual NCC zones into one large one and compare them against the control group. And then hierarchical multi-level modelling to assess the local impacts, because here we are dealing indeed with some very small numbers. Okay, we haven't got much time. So essentially what the evaluation procedure consists of is we have data from the control group, which gives us our controlled trend pattern. We have data from the NCC group, which are the dots there. And effectively what we're trying to do is to determine the statistical significance of an impact function, which is seeking to measure whether or not there has been a shift in the level of burglary compared to the control group. And we looked at different kinds of impact function, a step function, as if there's a sort of one-off improvement and then it stays stable, a linear function in which things get progressively better and better through time. Those were the 2 main ones. So that's for the NCC group as a whole. And then, as I say, the same approach, but modelling in terms of the individual NCC zones. This is the summary of the results. So here, and each of those bars refers to one of the 6 control groups against which the rates are being compared. So this, if we start with this one, these are the credible intervals that come out of the Bayesian modelling. And this is the critical value here, the beta parameter, which I referred to in one of the slides. The extent to which that credible interval lies to the left of 0 is indicative of, if you like, the success of the scheme. And so there is fairly strong evidence on the basis of Peterborough and the schemes that were brought in 2005, 2006, that the programme has been successful almost irrespective of which control group you take. But you can also see, if you then go through the individual schemes themselves, that some of them have been fairly unsuccessful, the one down here. Others towards the second and third one there have been more. So there is obviously a differential effect in terms of the results that we've obtained. Now, let me just briefly refer to the coverage rate. There seems to be some relationship between the local impacts and the coverage rates. Some of the variability in local NCC impacts may be due to this coverage rate. And indeed, there is some evidence to suggest that the larger the proportion of properties in a census output area that were visited, the greater the impact of the NCC scheme. This could be due to one of two things. One is a kind of threshold effect. The NC scheme would not have a measurable impact unless the number of properties exceed a threshold. So there is this sense in which, in order for schemes like this to work, you have to, if you like, hit a large enough number of properties, and if that, and unless you do that, if you like, the discouragement effect on potential would-be offenders is not going to work. That's one possible interpretation, the threshold effect. The other could be a rather more mundane and simple fact. It could be just a dilution effect. Because the COA, the census output area, is quite a small unit, and even though it's present, could be diluted with the NCC areas constituting only a tiny proportion of households in the COA. But whichever of those two factors are at work, the dilution effect or the threshold effect, certainly in terms of the results we've obtained so far, that's no reason to believe that this scheme is not successful. So I'm running out of time. Let me just point out that this was supported by the SRC, and that hasn't come out too well. I just took that picture. I was in Wales a few weeks ago, and I stumbled across this outside a police station, which shows a nasty person cold calling, and the woman inside the house is saying, "I will put an end to your dirty tricks by calling the police," and it gives a website and so on and so forth. So I took that picture, but I'm afraid it hasn't come out as well as I would hope. But it sort of points to the importance that the police attach to this scheme. I think I'll stop there, and if anyone would like to know the model that's been fitted, that's it.
It would be a pity if you didn't get a question or a comment, so I provide the
Thank you. It is the last talk of the day, so I do know.
I will be brief. In biology and social science, it is actually rare to put a lot of thought into the composition of control group, or as you've done, into control groups. And I think this is a level of sophistication for robustness and generalization that we should all seek to achieve and follow your very good example.
What can I say? Thank you very much.
I suppose there is an experimental design problem, isn't there, really? How do you choose the groups that you want to treat?
Well, how do the police choose?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know that.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
But, I mean, should they span some space of possible variables? Or should we not get burgled? I mean, I just don't know.
Well, as I said at the beginning, this is part of what's called reassurance policing within the UK, which is a form of policing in which the police seek to target at least some of their resources at particular neighbourhoods in response to the perceived threats that they face. And therefore, the places they choose are the ones where residents have complained particularly about rogue trading, unwelcome calls from traders, and where burglary rates have been somewhat higher. They're almost certainly linked in some way to schemes like the Neighbourhood Watch, because they, of course, have a kind of ongoing dialogue with the police. So there's going to be I don't know what you would call it in statistical terms. I suppose there's a selection bias in some sense about the way in which these places are chosen. But in a sense, what we're doing here is comparing, because what you would notice if you look closely at these graphs, if you had the chance to look more closely at these graphs, actually burglary rates were going up in Peterborough. And in fact, the burglary rates are increasing in some of these NCC regions as well. But it's not going up as fast, or in some cases it's going down. So there are these, if you like, these additional. I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but that's.
Just to follow that up, has your analysis eliminated the possibility that there's a regression to the mean effect? Because you picked out the particularly high responders, which would naturally then go down the next time you looked?
I'm not sure we have. So maybe that's something we need to look at. Perhaps I can take that one back.
As a backup to Phil's question, because you're using burglary rate as the measure of outcome, you will need to pick on areas which have high burglary rates. Because if you pick on areas which have low burglary rates, you won't be able to tell much. So the possibility of a regression to the mean effect is a priori fairly high, I would think.
Okay, well, let me take that one back. It's not something we've talked about, so I would be very reluctant to put my colleagues on the spot by implying that we had, but they may have done. All right, but I think if I can just pick up the nice comment that the gentleman made at the back, we haven't, because we must end on a positive note. This issue of control groups and the different types of control groups, we do attach great importance on. And I don't know how far that goes towards addressing your concerns. Perhaps it doesn't go far enough at all, but we did think that was important. Okay.